So I picked up some steel from the steel shop today. All these flat pieces of steel plate. This is what I'm going to be using to make the lift block that's going to go on top of that I told you guys in the previous video. This is going to give us another 6 inches of lift on the front. So this will go on top of this, in between this piece and the bottom of the frame on the front of the golf cart. I also got two 2-inch by 4-inch blocks that we're going to be welding to the top of this. We're also going to have to probably drill a hole in the top of this for that little guide pin on there to keep everything lined up. So that'll give us some more lift on those as well, on the blocks. And then we are also going to have some longer leaf spring shackles in the rear. So I have some 1 1/4. This is 3/16. We'll be using that to make these side pieces with, but we're going to make some long ones. And then in between those will be these little blocks that I have. So these will be basically like in here, because you're going to have 2 long pieces coming down to make the hangers longer. This will be in the middle of them to beef them up, to keep everything from flopping around and breaking. So that's what we're going to be using that for. And then these are the 2 6-inch pieces that we're going to be using for the front lift spindles, to make these lift spindles longer. So this will go in between here. This will hook back on in the original location, which I showed you guys if you've seen the last video. I had marked a line on these down the centers of them before I cut them, so that I knew where to line them back up. That way this and this was in the correct location when I welded all this back together. So I already got these cut. I beveled the edges on both of these. I got to go through and bevel the edges on these on both ends so that we can get a good weld on those. We'll just be welding those back together and putting some paint on them. So yeah, that's where I'm at right now. I'm going to go ahead and get moving on this thing. So I'm going to be doing the front first. I want to get this on and get the front wheels bolted up. And then I'm going to base the back off of that, because I don't want the back to be too high or too low. And I want to basically get my measurements for that after I do the front. So I'm going to go ahead and get this thing tore apart and get all this off of here, and start mocking up that front block and these spindles. So now that I have this old suspension off of here, the next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and take this lower plate that came with the new kit, and I'm going to mark my bolt pattern for the top and bottom holes. Well, actually the top holes, because we're going to be using this plate for our bottom on this front lowering block. So I'm going to set one of these steel plates that I have over here on top of this, and then we'll be able to mark our bolt pattern. So I'll have to lay one of these on here, and then I'll flip it over and mark it on the back side of this, and then that'll give us these 4 holes for our bolts to run through to bolt it back to the front of the frame. So I just clamped that on there with some vice grips. I took this pick, went around these holes, and marked where I wanted those to be. And take this back off here now. Got one there, and 2 over here. So I'm going to go through with a center punch, mark center on those, and drill those out real quick. There it is. Got those all lined up, drilled out. So next thing we're going to do is make the sidewalls, which will come up and back, front, and then we'll have us a 6-inch block that'll be up in here. Okay, so this is all just sitting here, but I'm just going to give you guys a rough idea of what this is going to look like. So instead of buying another top piece and welding it in, I just use this bottom plate as my lower piece. And I'll just weld this block to the bottom plate because it already has all my holes in it. And then I can run my bolt straight through and bolt it right up to all the original holes where everything is. Alright, so I have this thing all tacked together. And what I did was I welded some nuts on the underneath side of both of these so that I can run some bolts straight down into this and have something to hook to on the underneath side. So there's 2 nuts down here, and then these 2 bolts here are actually welded on the underneath side, the heads of these, so these can't spin. And I'm going to walk over to the cart and show you guys how this is going to go up on there real quick. Give you an idea of what's going on here. Alright, so we have these 2 holes back here that are closer together. Those are the ones that we're going to be using where these 2 nuts are. Actually be facing this other direction, like this. So we'll come down from the top up here, straight down through that, and it'll screw straight into these. Now these ones are actually going to run up through here, through the top of the frame, and through these other top holes on both sides. And then we'll just put a couple nuts up top to hold them front ones on there. Alright, so here are the 2 coming through the frame. One here, one here, and this is all just sitting on here. I'm going to be pulling this back off, and then here's the 2 back ones that will screw in down here underneath, and then this plate will go on the bottom of that. So this will get welded on to the bottom, and then my leaf spring will hook on here underneath, and then I'll extend the front spindles, and then that'll be the lift on the front, other than just bolting the rest of everything back on. Alright, so there is the block all mocked up. Everything's pretty much just tacked in place right now. I got to take it back off and weld everything up all the way around. I did have to put a little notch in right here. That's just to give me a little clearance for that nut for this leaf spring right here. So right now I'm going to go ahead and tack my spindles in place where they need to be. I had to order another roll of welding wire. It should be here tomorrow. I'll be able to get a little bit more done, but I'm going to get the spindles tacked where I need to be, and then I'll show you guys what they look like. So before I cut these, I'm going to put a line straight down the center of this from one end to the other. That way when I go to weld this thing back together, I can line this line on this end up with the line on this end, and then I'll make sure that this and this are in the correct location after I cut and re-weld this thing back together. Alright, so I have these cut. This is 1.5 inch diameter, outside diameter, and it's about 3/16 sidewall width. So I'm going to go pick some of that up from the steel shop tomorrow. I'm going to get 2 6-inch pieces. And one thing that helps when you're doing stuff like this is to have one of these. So what I did was I just stuck it on here on the outside, and that'll give you your diameter of what size you need. You can also use this part on the right hand side here if you need an inside diameter. Comes in really handy for that too. I believe this was called a caliber. I may be wrong, but I bought this years ago. I can't remember exactly what it was called, but I use this thing quite often. Alright, so here's one of the spindles. It's just tacked in place. I got to go through and weld it all the way around still, but that's how tall they're going to be. Alright, so here's the other one. I'm about to start on it. I just wanted to show you guys how I was lining these up. So I got a magnet on this side, keeping everything squared up on this side. And then over here, I just got a ruler, and I'm just putting this up against here, up against the top and the bottom pipe, and just making sure that that's lined up before I tack weld all this together. And then you can see that line right there where I lined everything back up again with the top and bottom.